Hello and welcome back to A Better World. This is your host Mitchell J. Rabin, and we're very glad you're joining us again today. Today we're going to have another very interesting show. We have with us from the West Coast Barry Carter, who is going to be discussing one of the most ancient and interesting subjects this planet has ever seen. Essentially, that is the essence of alchemy. Alchemy has shown up in virtually every single culture on the planet, every civilization, and with the overt interest of converting ordinary metal, such as lead, to gold. But that really is just the outer story. Barry will be revealing to us more of the inner story. The inner story involves our relationship as material beings to spirit, which we also are, spiritual beings. There's a very interesting synthesis that is growing through certain kinds of investigations that Barry has done and have been done over many centuries, really, and have been, in a sense, expedited in the last 25 or so years. So Barry has become an international speaker going around the country and the world speaking about this most impassioned, most important subject that is here really to transform humanity. As you know, this is what we like to talk about here on A Better World because, as we all know, this world is in great need of transformation. On that note, Barry.
Thank you.
Great to have you.
It's good to be had.
Good. And taking the substance also gives some sense of humor as well, apparently.
Oh, yes.
Okay, very good. If you would, just give us an idea of what your alchemical studies have shown. What is it that you've been focusing on in the midst of it?
We're not really focused on anything in particular. We're working with, obviously, the alchemical materials. They're related to gold, platinum, silver, even mercury is one of these alchemical materials.
You made a discovery. You made a discovery relatively recently that basically blew you away. Has changed your life, has changed the focus of your life.
Yeah.
How would you describe what that discovery is?
Well, a friend of mine was working with a gold mine using ozone, trying to clean up the mine waste. And in that process, he noticed that there were some very, very interesting materials. For example, some of these materials, if you dried them out in the sunshine, they'd disappear in a flash of light. Instantaneous conversion of matter to energy. And also...
Vaporize.
Not vaporize, disappear. Flash of light, no vapor. Doesn't even knock a pencil over if you set it next to it. But just literally disappear. And some of these materials, if you dried them out in the dark, for example, and you put your hand under them, they would float away. They would levitate.
You observed this?
I have not observed this. My friend observed it, and he describes it. I recorded his description of it. I've observed some of these things. I actually videotaped some of this stuff. Moving a magnet around it, it levitates away from the magnet. Now, that's superconductivity. Superconductivity supposedly doesn't happen at room temperature. Yet here we have a substance.
If you would, superconductivity for the audience.
Well, superconductivity is where a substance will store and conduct energy infinitely fast and store a great deal of energy. So a superconductor, the way they can tell if you've got a superconductor is if you put a magnet under it and it levitates on the magnetic field. Now, ordinarily...
Levitates on as in repelled
is
by?
Repelled by the magnetic field. Now, you can say, well, an ordinary magnet will repel another ordinary magnet. If you have two magnets and you put the same poles together, the magnet will jump up and slap back. It will
on the opposite pole.
On the opposite pole.
Sure.
It will not stay away. But when I demonstrate, I have a video on my website of this jumping away from a magnetic field, and it stays away. I demonstrate it now, but all of it's jumped away.
So that is the definition of superconductivity. That's actually kind of a symptom or a feature.
That's the way superconductivity is described or identified. Now,
but
a
its
superconductor
purpose,
has
its function
to be,
is...
well, they use them for magnetic levitation trains. They've got these maglev trains
Sure.
in Europe and the United States and Japan. And, but the problem with superconductivity is it has to be at the temperature of liquid nitrogen. The air we breathe is nitrogen. That's very, very cold. Liquefying, the air is not liquid anywhere on Earth. So it has to be that cold in order to be a superconductor. Yet here we're demonstrating properties that look like superconductivity at room temperature.
Oh, I see.
And scientists have said they know that there are superconductors in the body. They just don't know
the material for superconductivity.
Yeah, but they don't know what it is.
Now, I've heard back in the days when a lot of this material that you're now focusing on was being developed by a gentleman, a cotton farmer actually, named Dave Hudson, back in the Phoenix area.
Yes.
And I met him, as I told you, back in the summer of 1993. And he showed me how actually the United States government has been developing and analyzing superconductivity for a number of different kinds of purposes.
Oh, yeah.
And he was seeing the same thing manifested in the work that he was doing.
Right.
And the idea, as I understood it, was that if the body became a superconductor, basically it was able to transmute intelligence and have a network of intelligence that went far beyond the physical body into the world.
Exactly.
He was also doing experiments using this in the treatment of various illnesses, or actually he had doctors who were using it, utilizing it in their practices, and getting rather formidable results with some very serious degenerative diseases.
You bet.
Is that the same as...
We're seeing similar things in our work with these materials as well. A superconductor is a quantum coherent substance. That's the way, that's another part of the definition of what a superconductor is. Now, what quantum coherence means is there's a bunch of atoms behaving like a single atom. That means they're in constant and instantaneous communication. Physicists call it non-local communication.
Basically, what we have and call prayer is related to the phenomenon.
Well, exactly, because what non-locality is, it's the same thing as saying omnipresent.
Exactly.
God is omnipresent everywhere at once. Non-local means it's not anywhere in particular, it's everywhere at once. Scientists are talking about the same thing, only they kind of use a backwards term to talk about it. And we're seeing that these materials have these non-local properties, and when people ingest them or put them on, rub them on, or actually inhale them, we're actually getting ormus out of the air all the time. One of our scientific researchers in the ormus field has actually trapped it, using a magnetic levitation trap, trapped it out of the air and measured it. So we know that it's in the air, and we know that pranayama, some of the yogic breathing techniques, will pull it out of the air. So when we get this and concentrate it in the body, we're seeing amazing results. It's like, okay, it's like you've got cell phones in every cell. There's a cell phone in every cell.
It would make sense there would be a cell phone in every cell.
Well, you'd think, yeah.
Hence the name.
Sure, sure. And the nerves are just kind of the backup, the hardwired backup. And these cell phones have batteries that are almost dead and antennas that are broken. So it's like, can you hear me now? No? What about now? And so
ingestion of the ormus, which we'll define in a moment,
goes in and charges the cell phone and repairs the DNA antenna so that it's making a better connection. And when that connection is improved, the cell phone can not just talk to the cell next door, it can talk to the cells in your big toe, or the cells at the end of the tip of your hair, or the cells in somebody else's big toe, or the cells in the cat, or the cells in the dog.
Across the world.
Exactly. It's in quantum coherence with all of these other elements that are in the same state.
Coherence, also affinity.
Exactly.
In effect.
Exactly. And this effect has actually been measured by some scientific researchers in Hungary.
Through what means?
They had 2 containers of the same ormus material, And one of these containers was resonated, and the other one started responding. And so they tried to measure any phase difference between the two, because measuring phase difference allows you to tell how fast the communication is going. And they found that there was no phase difference. It was instantaneous. They could not detect any phase difference between the two. So there's instantaneous communication between those two containers.
What I hear you really saying, Barry, is that Ormus is a cosmic battery charger.
Cosmic battery charger and cosmic communicator. It's like,
Definitely.
imagine, well, we've got the internet, right?
Yeah.
Well, imagine that there's something, I'll call it the internet. This is the inner network of communication between all things and all beings. And imagine that we've got a modem that's damaged. Or let's say it's just a
dial-up.
a 4K modem. It's a real slow dial-up modem. And all of a sudden we improve the communication, and now we have a DSL or high-speed or broadband communication. Yeah. Only this is even better than that, because it's not limited in bandwidth, it's not limited in speed. It's instantaneous, and it's infinite bandwidth. And so suddenly we're connected to the internet through this high-speed connection, and things get better. But we don't want them to get better too fast, because we're always putting out a message. Sometimes we put out the message of what we want, and sometimes we put out the message of what we don't want. So if we're putting out the message of what we want, that's great. It'll come back quicker, because the message goes out quicker and the echo comes back quicker with the Ormus. But if we put out the message of what we don't want will come back quicker.
So what you're really suggesting is that there's a certain amount of, you could say, psychological and linguistic training that should actually accompany the use of the substance to be responsible for it. Because, you know, it's funny that you're saying this, because when I first met Dave Hudson, my life changed. I experienced some, I believe, of what you experienced speaking to your friend Jim, the gold mine cleaner. I went, man, it's here. I mean, it's here, and this is the time of all times for it to come and rain on Earth. And God knows we need it.
We need rain.
So I said, if I could be part of bringing this intelligence, if you will, and expert communication, etc., to the planet, I will have been fulfilling my mission, as Dave Hudson also felt.
You bet.
And then I realized, while that was true, what this substance, essentially light, he was describing it as, and I think in many ways correctly, was doing, was amplifying what was already there.
Right.
So while it has the potential to be a corrective device, it in itself actually isn't. What it is giving us the tools to make a better world, if you will.
You bet.
But it isn't in itself creating a better world. Therefore, it could be used for good or not good. And it is up to the user to be responsible in his or her communications and mindset to make it so.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
It's like your cell phone. You can call somebody up.
It's only hardware.
You can call somebody up and curse them out. The cell phone doesn't care what you say. Doesn't care at all.
Exactly.
You can call them up and tell them you love them. You can praise them.
That's exactly it.
Either way, the cell phone doesn't care. But the echo that comes back, when you go out and put your ear to an iron rail, you can hear the train coming before you can hear it through the air.
Right.
The echo,
or Indians putting their ear to the ground to hear
the horses. Yeah. So the information, when it travels faster, let's say you're on the edge of the Grand Canyon and you shout, "I love you!" And a minute later, the Grand Canyon shouts back to you and says, the Grand Canyon says, "I love you." You think somebody out there loves you.
Exactly.
Or if you shout, "I hate you." And a minute later, it sounds like, so the feedback, knowing that the sound is coming not just from something out there, it's really the echo of your own thoughts.
Exactly.
When you shorten the echo time, you become more aware that this is your thought going out and it's coming back.
What you're doing is you're materializing spirit, if you will, interestingly. You're, as you were saying to me earlier, you're making the communication mechanism denser, like the ground in listening, or like the railroad track. You're making it more materially denser, which allows that to be a medium of communication more effectively.
Exactly.
Is that so?
Exactly.
Let's go into the kind of the hardcore matter, if you will, of the substance of Ormus.
Sure.
First, if you would, just define it for the audience, and then let's get into the oceanic qualities of it.
Well, the definition that we found works the best is these are the precious metal elements, the elements right down the center of the periodic chart.
Are they the gallium-based?
No, they're called the transition elements. They're platinum group elements mostly.
Platinum-based. Oh, platinum-based.
Platinum group. Platinum, palladium, rhodium, ruthenium, osmium, and
iridium.
I think I said that. Anyway,
Okay.
those are the platinum group elements. There's 6 of them,
yes,
plus gold, which is also right down the center of the chart. Mercury, cobalt, nickel, copper. All of these have an Ormus form. We've also found that iron has an Ormus form, and some of the other elements.
So what exactly
Maybe all
is,
elements have this form.
What is it? What does Ormus stand for?
The thing
and
that distinguishes
what is a form of Ormus?
The thing that distinguishes it is they're spectroscopically invisible. That's the only thing that all of them seem to have in common. You examine them spectroscopically and you cannot see them. Spectroscopically, you see a pile of this stuff, but they're spectroscopically invisible. And that's the defining characteristic.
What does Ormus stand for as an acronym?
Ormus is not an acronym. I always like to put it in capital letters because I think it's important. But
it's a word you invented?
No, David Hudson actually invented the word. And he didn't invent it. It's an old word. It's been around for a long, long time. There was an Egyptian Gnostic priest who was named Ormus in 43 AD or something like that. But the term, the word itself, has been used in connection with alchemy, believe it or not. But the word, as we're using it, was suggested by David Hudson. He said they're ORMs, O-R-M-E-S, and that was an acronym for orbitally rearranged monatomic elements. We're not sure they're monatomic. We're not sure they're orbitally rearranged. We don't have access to the information that David Hudson had access to, and there's some good reasons why they may not be monatomic, so we call it Ormus instead. Ormus and Orm sound, Orms sound
similar enough.
And David Hudson suggested that they were similar.
The main thing I'd like people to kind of digest is this idea that what you're working on, Barry, and what Dave Hudson just prior to you was working on, and others even before him, is this idea that is discussed actually and offered in the Old Testament of manna. There's this idea that there is a spiritual substance, an essence, if you will, that can be ingested and sustain human life and sentient life. And the taking of which, by the way, spiritualize or divinizes the taker.
Sure.
And therefore plugs us in, if you will, to this network, this cosmic network of understanding that could develop and lead into things such as telepathy or any number of other, what I consider higher brain functions anyway. And it's kind of commonly known at this point by anyone who does any kind of look into parapsychology, you know. And what I remember was that Dave Hudson had said that there is iridium and rhodium in the brain material itself.
Yes.
So in a sense, I guess we're feeding that, we're increasing that
feeding that
amount, that quantity. And in so doing, we're aligning our nervous system with the substance, and maybe even all our entire cellular life through the blood. And by so doing, essentially raising us up to another level of activity.
The Bible actually describes an instance where this happens. Moses took the golden calf and burned it in the fire and ground it to a powder and strewed it upon the water so that the children of Israel could eat of it. Now, how do you burn gold? Presumably he was doing it so that he would raise their spiritual condition or improve their connection.
Yeah.
How do you burn gold? What happens when you heat gold up?
Yeah.
It melts.
Right.
Yeah. Gold doesn't burn.
However, and this is what Dave Hudson discovered in the Soviet Academy of Scientists.
I have burned gold and converted it into a white powder and eaten it. I have done all of these things. And it's just a very edible. It tastes sort of like milk of magnesia or something. It's a a very innocuous taste.
Right.
And when you do that, you can feel it. You can feel the change in consciousness from doing it. And the technology that I did it with, I did it in my backyard. It wasn't a sophisticated laboratory. I didn't use any sophisticated. It's not something that I want people to do because it's a little dangerous and so on. But basically, you burn it with sodium compounds. You can burn it with lye. You can burn it with salt.
But you do have something that you do share at your lectures and workshops of taking seawater, ocean water, and putting it through a certain process. Could you describe that process?
Well, the process is real simple. I can describe it in one sentence. I mean, it's very simple. You take ocean water or sea salt dissolved in water and raise the pH to 10.78 and no higher using sodium hydroxide, also known as lye. And I sometimes use the supermarket variety of the lye. It's probably not as good as a high-tech lye.
It's a bit strong to ingest, isn't it?
You do not want to ingest the lye. You don't even want to get it on your skin or your clothes. There's a whole bunch of safety precautions to take when using lye. But you raise the pH to 10.78 using lye and then wash the resulting precipitate with fresh water 3 times. So you'll get a white precipitate. It'll drop out. Remember in the 60s we talked about if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. Well, now if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the precipitate. Right. Stephen Wright said that.
Okay. So you take the precipitate.
Oh, yeah.
You wash it.
Yeah.
Essentially, is it essentially transformed salt?
No, it's actually the M-state elements, the Ormus elements.
It's the Ormus elements, so it's basically a white powder.
It's a white...
And you can wash the powder.
It looks like snow.
And you can wash that.
Yeah.
And it maintains its integrity.
Oh, yeah.
You wash it, and
then it'll settle out, and you'll pour the clear liquid off the top, and you wash it 2 or 3 times. And in that process, you'll bring the pH down to 9.5 or so. You can buy bottled water that's at pH 9.5. It's not going to hurt you at all.
Right. And then from that state, you then put it into water and drink it?
No, it's already in water.
Oh, it's already in water. Okay.
Yeah. Wow. You just drink it.
So in that way, we can become enlightened.
Not only that, but we can grow walnuts that are the size of tennis balls.
Let's take a peek. Would you show us a few of your
sure.
remarkable... So what we're talking about, just if I can sum this up a little bit for everybody, what we're talking about is an enlightening substance that is naturally occurring. Everyone can have it, and it's in fact as plenty as ocean water.
Yeah.
Which of course
it's very abundant.
Comprises most of our planet and most of our bodies. 2, it is used as a health-inducing, as a way of creating health because you're shifting the pH of the body. You're alkalizing the body, and we know that degenerative diseases cannot continue in such a state.
Right.
And on the farm...
On the farm, this is an orange that was fed with Ormus, and this is a cantaloupe. Notice they're the same size. This is an ordinary supermarket orange compared to the Ormus orange. This is an enormous orange. This is an ordinary walnut, and this is the walnut that's been treated with Ormus. This is the tree the ordinary walnut grew in, and this is a tree that Ormus was treated with. So we're seeing just phenomenal increases. We've seen 12-foot tall corn that was treated with Ormus. We're seeing just remarkable
Basically,
increases.
You're just putting some of that precipitate around in the soil.
A very little bit.
And what is this? A
This-
beard from
This gentleman,
white to dark?
This gentleman had, his beard was gray when I first met him, and then after taking Ormus copper for 2 or 3 years, he showed it up at one of my lectures in Los Angeles, and I didn't recognize him. I said, "Can I help you?" And he said, "Barry, you know me." And as soon as I heard him speak, I recognized who he was. And there he is. His beard has turned back to its original color.
And he's spinning ballerinas on the top of a finger.
Well, at the same
something like
year,
that.
he was 55 years old. He was the male lead in a regional production, Southern California regional production of the Nutcracker. He's the guy that's tossing the ballerinas around. So,
Amazing.
pretty impressive.
Amazing. So in a sense, this could be an ideal natural organic replacement,
Yes.
no pun intended, for genetically modified food.
Well, there's a problem there. When you use a genetically modified seed, it seems to revert back to its original. So that might not, the companies that make the genetically modified seeds, they may not like that.
In our closing minute, if you would, because this is cutting down so deep to the level of DNA, could you just give us a quick synthetic view of what effect you are supposing or feel that from your research Ormus is having on DNA?
I feel that it repairs the DNA, repairs it to this non-physical spirit template. And any disease or condition that's related to damaged DNA seems to disappear, basically.
And you had said earlier about a very interesting experiment that was done when a laser was shot through DNA. Could you just recount that?
Basically, if you shoot a laser through the air, the empty air, you get a certain interference pattern on a target. If you shoot it again through the DNA, you will get a different interference pattern. Well, what they did was they did this experiment, and then just to check up, they shot it again through the air, through the empty air. And the third time, they thought they would get the empty air DNA interference, or empty air interference pattern.
Right.
Instead, they got the DNA interference pattern. So there's something in the air that literally, or not even in the air, that something in that space that
Remained.
literally has that DNA pattern. And you'd think in the course of a month that DNA pattern would have gone out of the air or gone out of the room. But they were even getting that DNA pattern for a whole month afterwards.
Barry, you're doing beautiful work, and I just want to support you in letting
Well,
more,
there's many
more
other people working with me.
know about this, and
Yeah.
I thank them too. So on that note, we'll have you back again to discuss this in greater depth.
Thank you.
Absolutely. This is Mitchell J. Rabin for A Better World. Think about Ormus. Go to the website www.subtleenergies.com. You can contact us also for more information. Thanks so much for joining us, and look forward to seeing you next week.